Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey joining us from Maryland. Good morning, sir. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
We know that Speaker Johnson told House Republicans on Saturday that Trump wants to pass one all-encompassing sweeping package. That will include all of his policy priorities. We're talking border, we're talking economy. What is your reaction to that? And would you support it if it benefits your constituents?
Well, I think we'll have to see what's in the package. And, I think the first step for the Republicans, though, is to figure out if they actually have a consensus internally to do that. I know there are Republicans who'd rather have two steps, including, I believe, Senator Thune, who's now the majority leader in the Senate. So I don't know that it's going to go in one package, but, we'll take a look. But I think at the end of the day, the key is you're sort of alluding to is getting things done that the American people need. That doesn't necessarily mean everything in the Trump agenda. In fact, there are going to be quite a few things that I'm sure we'll object to, but hopefully we can get something done and move forward in a bipartisan manner.
Speaking of bipartisanship, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries pledging that House Democrats will work with Republicans. For the GOP, as you well know, sir, its top issues are what I mentioned a moment ago, the economy, the border. Where do you see the compromise from Democrats on those very issues?
Well, the border, for example, is pretty interesting because, as we were saying, 9 months ago, I guess at this point, there was a bipartisan Senate bill moving forward back then that would have provided immediate assistance at the border to address the problem. Even though it was moving forward in the Senate, then candidate Donald Trump told Speaker Johnson to kill it because he didn't want to have a win, quote unquote, for President Biden. So, hopefully they'll be able to move past that sort of approach, which is sort of raw political and putting politics before the people. But we'll see.
Speaker Johnson, as you well know, is facing the narrowest majority in nearly 100 years. Is there anything the Democrats can do to gain leverage on getting part of their agenda into bills this upcoming session?
I think so. And, if you look back to the last Congress, passing the bills to keep the government open and to keep us from defaulting on our debts, the Democrats played the key role in getting that done. We saw that a little bit in the CR just a few weeks ago, where Speaker Johnson tried to do it without Democratic assistance, fell flat on his face, and then tried to pass another one without even reaching out to Hakeem Jeffries before putting the bill on the floor. Obviously, that didn't work. But then when he came together and reached out and we moved forward in a joint way, we got it done in a matter of hours. So I think it can be done, but there's got to be will, on both sides of the aisle.
Monday marks the 4th anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. We know Speaker Johnson is planning to investigate the January 6th committee. Sir, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and if you have a message to your friends across the aisle on this very investigation.
I do, and we've said this before. January 6th was a very dark day for this country, one of the darkest in our history. And, to try and politicize that in a way that elevates the people who were rioters, who committed assaults on police officers, have been convicted in court of committing sedition, and in some instances have pled guilty and acknowledged that what they did was not just wrong, but criminal. I think that's short-sighted and wrong, and it's bad for the country. I think it really sends the wrong message, especially at a time when we have other kind of, awful behavior like what happened in New Orleans just a few days ago. We don't want to send a signal to people like that these kind of violent outbursts are appropriate, whether it's at the Capitol or whether it's in support of a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. We want to tamp that down so people make sure we make the decisions about what happens in this country using ballots and not bullets.
So you think this investigation is unnecessary at this point?
Not just unnecessary. I think it's wrong. I think it really is a subversion of what the Department of Justice needs to be doing right now. For example, in the New Orleans case, the first thing that happened when that attack occurred was we need to reach out to the FBI. Now, just a few months ago, I had colleagues on the Republican side calling up for us to defund the FBI. Can you imagine how we would have been able to go forward if we didn't have an FBI in place? They did a very quick investigation and turned around the information quickly. Same thing with the attempted assassination in Butler. They have to stop playing politics with those rule of law offices like the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the like, because we got to protect ourselves in very dangerous times from those sorts of attacks.
You've mentioned the New Year's attacks. In the last congressional session, you were on the Committee on Homeland Security. We have been obviously closely following the attacks in both New Orleans and Las Vegas. What do you want to see happen next in this investigation, Congressman?
Well, I think, you don't have a defendant. So the Department of Justice doesn't have to prepare for a criminal trial. So that makes it easier for us to go forward with an investigation.
Sure.
Without worrying about getting in the way of that. But I think we need to move forward with that. Frankly, we've got unfinished business from the Butler attempted assassination, and the one at Mar-a-Lago as well. I mean, I think the Congress has a lot of work to do on that front to make sure that in that instance, the Secret Service has stepped up and gotten better so that we make sure we don't have an event like that again. But also these lone wolf attacks have been pretty prevalent. And, we haven't even mentioned the school shootings yet. We've got to find ways to address that, and turning to each other instead of on each other is going to be the most important way to do that. Got to elevate our law enforcement at federal and state and local levels to make sure that they're able to focus on these things and have the resources to do it, so we can protect our communities from these kinds of attacks.
We know the FBI sent a bulletin out to law enforcement to keep an eye out for copycat attacks like we saw on New Year's Eve. Is that common, sir, not to release that information to the public and just law enforcement?
You mean requesting the bulletin to keep an eye out for copycats?
Yes, they put out a bulletin to law enforcement to keep an eye out for copycats. Is that common, to just tell law enforcement and not the public itself to be careful?
Well, I do think I saw messages that they were saying they were concerned about copycat issues. But yeah, I think internal bulletins make a lot of sense. And from the standpoint of reaching out, one of the problems we had at Butler was we didn't have real-time communications between the local, state, and federal law enforcement. I hope one of the lessons of that is that we make sure we have very close lines of communication so we can share information and connect the dots quickly. So hopefully we can prevent these kinds of attacks.
All right, good point. Congressman Glenn Ivey, always great to see you, sir. Happy New Year. Thank you again.